day one of exposing black history because it literally didn't even happen. So we all know the story, right? 1955, Montgomery, Alabama. Rosa Parks, she's this tired seamstress. She refuses to give up her seat to this white guy after a long day's work because her feet hurt. She gets arrested for this, and then it sparks a bus boycott. She becomes the mother of the civil rights movement. She's now remembered as a brave hero who stood up to power. The entire thing was a planned publicity stunt from the beginning. By 1955, Rosa Parks was already an experienced left-wing activist. She and her husband were attending Communist Party meetings. Also, her husband owned a car. So this is not even the first time this happened. Black people were getting arrested for this stuff, but the NAACP and the activists ignored them, and Rosa Parks was specifically selected as the perfect subject for this agenda. She was polite, she was employed, she was married, she was seen as somebody who would be sympathetic to white people. And actually, the Rosa Parks incident itself was actually a reproduction of a prior incident where they planned to make a different woman into this kind of figurehead, but then they found out that she got pregnant out of wedlock, and so they had to sub her out for old Rosa. What's funny too is that she actually had to ride around on a few different buses before this happened, since the rules weren't really meant for women. They weren't really enforced on female passengers. Also, she wasn't even exhausted. She admitted in her autobiography that she refused the seat not because she was physically tired, but because she was tired of giving in to injustice. But that wasn't her first run-in with that bus driver either. James F. Blake in 1943, Blake kicked her off the bus entirely, yet that incident got zero attention from the activists because she hadn't been chosen yet by the activists to play this role. Here's the kicker though, Montgomery lost segregated buses, but it didn't actually require black people to give up seats to white people if no other seats were available. Rosa Parks was sitting in the middle section, and she wasn't asked to move until more passengers started boarding. Basically, you had a white section, a middle section, and a black section, and the driver was trying to move the sign to expand the white section of the bus into some of the middle seats, since there were a bunch of white people about to get on the bus. And so he asked Rosa Parks and a few black guys if they would move from the middle section into the black section, since it would literally be illegal for him to tell the white passengers to go sit in the black section. So the guys were like, all right, yeah, whatever. But she went along with her plan, and so she was arrested because she wasn't listening to the bus driver. But she did not stop there at buses. She supported Malcolm X and the Nation of Islam, the whole kill white police officers guys. She marched in Farrakhan's Million Man March in 1995. She backed the Black Power movement, defended black rioters in the Detroit riots in 1967. She endorsed domestic terrorist groups like the Black Panthers, also the kill white police officers guys, the Black Liberation Army, Weather Underground, the bomb and kill white people guys. Nobody knows about the history of left-wing terrorism, dude. This stuff was all going on. Despite all of that, though, she still spoke at the 1988 Democratic National Convention, hailed as a hero. Rosa Parks was a calculating revolutionary whose actions were part of this broader left-wing conspiracy, but the myth that we're all taught is designed to hide this and the radicalism that created it, so that we're taught, some feel-good narrative when we're in kindergarten. Truth matters. I love black people. Day 2 of exposing black history because, it literally didn't even happen. I've heard for my whole life that we can't understand American history without essentially orienting the entire conversation toward the practice of slavery. Thus, we must take time to discuss the first legally recognized slave owner in the American colonies, a black man named Anthony Johnson. Now, I don't know why we don't learn about this guy in school. I mean, he got to Virginia in 1621. Historian Philip Foner called him the patriarch of black property owners in America. So essentially, Anthony Johnson was kidnapped by African slave traders in southern Africa, sold to the Portuguese, sent to Virginia, where he eventually earned his freedom. But then he would go on to purchase slaves himself and even use the legal system that we're told is so systemically anti-black to take a black slave away from a white guy, and then he would end up becoming, an extraordinarily wealthy tobacco farmer. So I don't bring him up to be like, oh look, black people can be successful in America. We obviously know that. It's just to say that how he obtained that level of success seems to be a bit typical for that time, wouldn't you say? So he had 5 indentured servants. He had 4 white guys and 1 black guy. A little bit of a sidebar on indentured servants. I don't know if you know this, but because indentured servitude was a temporary labor contract rather than lifetime ownership, like with slavery, they were often treated far worse than slaves were. They were worked harder, they were beaten worse, they were starved more because their masters had no long-term interest in their health, which is why the mortality rate of indentured servants was actually much higher than slaves. By the way, indentured servants in America, overwhelmingly white, just if we're keeping score. But the one black indentured servant that he had was a man named John Kaser. He claimed that his indentured servitude contract was only 7 years, so he wanted to leave, and his wife and his kids begged Anthony Johnson to let them go. But Anthony Johnson said, what are you talking about? There's no contract. I simply own you. So John Kaser leaves anyway to go work for this white guy on his plantation saying, hey, I'm a free guy now. Anthony Johnson literally chases this guy down and gets the courts involved to say, nope, I'm taking you away from this white guy. I actually own you for life. So because of Anthony Johnson, John Kaser became one of the first Africans in America enslaved for life as a result of civil suit rather than punishment. It's like literally on his Wikipedia page. That's what he's known for. Save me the crying about American racism when black people were literally enslaving other black people on American soil before George Washington was even born. Truth matters. I love black. Day 3 of exposing black history because it literally didn't even happen. But we've all heard about the slave trade in school, right? You had these Europeans running around the jungle, snatching up Africans, taking them across the ocean away from their black brothers and sisters who they were living with together in perfect harmony. Yeah, I had to watch Roots too. Problem is, it like literally never happened. Nobody had to go out of their way to find slaves in Africa. They were already there waiting in slave markets that were set up by African kingdoms which had been running for almost 1,000 years. But even when you look at the map of where these slaves were going, you've got all of this movement going to South America, you've got some movement in the Caribbean, and you got a little bit of movement, a little bit making its way up there to America. Apparently that's the one we're all supposed to talk about. Literally only 2 to 5% of these slaves ended up in America, but we're the only country that has to apologize for our history when we were just doing what everybody else was doing, except way less. And yeah, like it's our fault that Africans were establishing these markets to sell each other off in the first place. Before we had the transatlantic slave trade, we had the trans-Saharan slave trade, where these same kingdoms would sell African slaves to different Muslim countries in the Middle East, which, by the way, would famously castrate their African slaves, which is why today you don't have black populations in those countries. So the only thing that actually changed for the Africans was that instead of sending out other Africans across the desert, now they're just going out in boats. And the trade itself was mainly focused on an exchange of goods. African kingdoms would take the captured men and women from weaker and rival tribes, they would load them out on boats, and in exchange they were given various trade goods. What they valued most of all, though, apparently were guns and liquor, and apparently liquor especially. Apparently they wouldn't even bother talking to the Europeans unless they were given rum first. So this slave trade would go on until the early 1800s, until Britain and America both decided that they were going to make it illegal to trade slaves from Africa. And the Africans did not exactly like this. Kingdoms like Dahomey, you know, the one that the Netflix people made that like Black Queen girl boss movie about, yeah, that one, they continued to just trade slaves against the ban. So Britain staged the West African Naval Squadron specifically for the job of trying to stop Africans from enslaving each other, selling other Africans to places all over the world. And Britain spent decades trying diplomacy, helping the Kingdom of Dahomey to stop raiding and attacking other Africans, to get slaves by talking with their king, Gezo. The conversations basically went something like this: ahoy, it's me, a British guy. We find the practice of slavery to be quite not cool. Are you interested in palm oil? We could help you out with that. Yes, hello, it's me, a black guy. No thanks. So this song and dance would kind of go on as such until the French would go to war with the Kingdom of Dahomey, put down their army of black queens with some of the most lopsided casualty reports of all time, and then finally make it so Africans stopped enslaving other Africans. Truth matters. I love black people. Day 3 of exposing black history because it like literally didn't even happen. Well, you probably heard about Thomas Jefferson allegedly having sex with one of his black slaves, Sally Hemings. Apparently they had a bunch of kids together. You learn all about this in school. If you go to Monticello, Jefferson's estate, it's all you hear about. And this is of course done because they would like to further tar the image of the men who founded our country. The good news is that it's literally not even true. Sally Hemings was not even black like they portray her now to be. She was 3/4 white, 1/4 black. Brittany Venti would be more black than she was. She had fair skin, straight hair, the whole 9 yards. They need you to believe that she was fully 100% black because that's what suits their narrative. Okay, fine, who cares? What was the relationship that they even had? Well, Sally was Jefferson's daughter's servant. Thousands of letters, tens of thousands of letters. The only thing Jefferson ever says about her is, Marie's servant is doing well after having a child. And the only time Sally was ever with Jefferson outside of her time in Monticello was in Paris. And she wasn't even the person that he requested to accompany him. He wanted an older woman to accompany his daughter and care for her, but Sally was the only one available because she was inoculated against smallpox. And even though she was 14 when his daughter Marie was 9, when the two stayed with the Adams in France, they said that Sally was even more childish than the 9-year-old daughter Marie. And if you know anything about Jefferson, it does not exactly match up with his taste in women. When Jefferson was in Paris and he's building up the roster, he had a couple women women that he was going after, writing letters to. One was a relative of Alexander Hamilton, and the other was Maria Cosway, to whom he wrote his famous love letter, The Dialogue Between My Head and My Heart, wherein he describes with intricate detail the duel between his head and his heart over how smitten he's become with her. The point being, Thomas Jefferson was a highly intelligent, aristocratic guy who was going after highly intelligent, mature, aristocratic English women, not exactly 14-year-old immature slave girls. Where does this even come from in the first place? Well, there was a paternity test that showed that Eston Hemmings, only Eston Hemmings, not her other son Thomas Woodson, was a match with Jefferson's Y chromosomes. Okay, so that's literally it. Conclusive proof, Jefferson, you are the father. No, because that DNA also matched Randolph Jefferson, Thomas's younger brother, and his 5 sons. A little bit about this Randolph character. He was described by the Monticello slave Isaac Jefferson as Old Master's brother, Mas Randolph, a mighty simple man, used to come out among black people, play the fiddle, and dance half the night. He was also known for going to bed with them after he was done playing. And wouldn't you know it, guess who was invited to come hang out at Monticello 9 months before Eston Hemmings was born? Randolph Jefferson and his kids. So who do you think is more likely to be the father? The sensitive young man who writes sappy love letters to English aristocrats and had to stay home for 2 days because he had a terrible headache after he embarrassed himself in front of a girl he liked? Or his brother who liked to get down, party with slaves, and was also known to have a little bit of an appetite for black queens? Day 5 of exposing black history, because it literally did not even happen. So we hear a lot of talk about how the white man just wants to keep the black man down, keep him under his control, under his oppression. That is not true. The opposite actually happened once, where you had a bunch of wealthy, influential Americans working to give black people their own country back over in Africa. The American Colonization Society. It was founded in 1816 with the purpose of giving free black people their own land and government where they could rule themselves freely. Even Abraham Lincoln supported it. Millions of dollars went into this to get them guns, supplies, construction materials, and passage to what would become Liberia. Its capital, Monrovia, was named after James Monroe, who had the federal government provide millions of dollars to start off the project. But when the Liberians arrived to land that had been set out and purchased, it wasn't long before they were attacked by some of the hostile tribes that wanted to stop them from colonizing, even though all parties on both sides were African. The Liberians were able to beat them, however, because of the weaponry provided to them by the United States. So by the mid-19th century, Liberia would declare its independence. It would adopt a constitution nearly identical to the United States, with the 2 exceptions being slavery is illegal, and the only people allowed to be citizens of the republic, vote, and hold office would be Negroes, which is to say the descendants of black Americans. It was the only country on the continent, alongside Ethiopia, that was not colonized by the Europeans, as it was being protected by America. Now, around the 1900s, Liberia would start to become almost a magical place in the mind of black nationalists in America, because you've got a land of free black people. They're never under the heel of the white man, they have civilization. What's not to like? Marcus Garvey, who was the head of the Universal Negro Improvement Association, or UNIA, he would work to send a delegation to Liberia to see if they could have more black people from America move there to start basically the real-life Wakanda. When the delegates arrived, however, they were a little bit shocked at what they found, because the Liberians were enjoying high culture, they're wearing suits, sipping tea, while at the same time, they ran rubber plantations of Africans who were almost in various forms of forced labor, and the delegates themselves were almost immediately arrested and deported as they protested against this. Wait a second, hold on. Aren't we supposed to be brothers? Aren't we supposed to not be doing this? America conducted a report on Liberia through the State Department, which was known as the Christie Report, and it found that Liberians had developed a system of debts and contract labor that was slavery in all but name. A large proportion of the contract laborers, recruited under conditions of criminal compulsion scarcely distinguishable from slave raiding and slave trading. Interesting. So Liberia would continue with this whole system where the Americo-Liberians would rule the other Africans until around the 1980s, where a coup would be launched and plunge the country into a civil war, rendering it as one of the poorest and most dangerous countries on the planet. Damn it. I hate when that happens.